Scott Baradell is coming back on the James Show. A new poll shows that 70% of Americans are in favor of labor unions. I didn't know they were this popular, Scott.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think, of course, the big difference is in the 1960s, that's the last time unions were this popular. According to a Gallup poll they do every year, about 70% of Americans are pro-union, according to this poll. Of course, in the 60s, 30% of American workers were in unions. Today, it's less than 10%, so a lot has changed.
Oh, so now most of these people, they're not in a union. They probably aren't even union adjacent. They just like the idea of how a union sounds?
Yeah, because a lot of things have changed. One of the biggest changes has been there's been a party realignment. Currently, both parties, you could argue, are pro-union. I mean, the Democrats have introduced legislation to make it easier to organize unions. The Republicans, meanwhile, have said things like, we're going to bring back manufacturing jobs, and we're going to keep, undocumented people from crossing and taking your jobs. And those are all things that, in different ways, appeal to labor.
Historically speaking, haven't the Democrats been more pro-union than the Republicans?
Historically, yes, but that kind of changed in the big moment in terms of differentiating the two parties was in the early 1980s when Ronald Reagan, when the air traffic controllers declared a strike, he just fired them all because he said it was a national security issue, and he just kind of replaced all workers. That was a big moment in terms of the decline of union power. And then in the 90s, under Clinton, you had NAFTA. And so that led to this globalization of jobs to where the kind of wages that unions had been negotiating were simply not competitive. Union shops would just go out of business if they're trying to compete with workers in Mexico or other parts of the world.
Well, that was always the concern. Like, hey, you can keep asking for more and more concessions, but eventually you're just going to cost yourself your job. Has anyone learned from that? And is there a whole lot of manufacturing base that's not unionized?
Well, I think for the most part, globally, that's certainly the case, and more of American manufacturing has moved to, say, the southern U.S. and other places where unions are less prominent. But we haven't found a solution to the loss of manufacturing jobs. I mean, Donald Trump has introduced the idea of having trade tariffs and other things that could protect higher wages here, but none of that has really come to fruition. And that's why you've seen things like Starbucks workers and Amazon workers trying to unionize. And I think seeing that in the news and the struggles a lot of people have in terms of their wages just not going up despite prices going up has led to a lot of frustration and the idea that unions could maybe be something that makes things better.
I generally am with the 30% of the country that's more skeptical, more negative on unions than I'm positive. I realize that somewhere some unions done some good things, but generally speaking, there's a reason why all these small business owners, medium-sized business owners, and big business owners, none of them like unions.
Well, absolutely. I mean, you go back to when this all started in the U.S. in the late 1800s. You had big businesses, railroads and oil companies, they would run roughshod over workers. Workers that protested their wages would actually they'd bring in what they called Pinkerton men, these thugs that would just actually kill workers in some cases. It was very ugly. And so there were important reasons why the labor union movement emerged to give labor some power to counter the power of these big companies that were emerging with the first industrialization in the U.S. But over time, you've seen that's led to abuse of power on the union side, and it's led increasingly to companies just not being able to be very competitive when they're union shops.
All right, Scott Baradell, how do they find your work outside of WBAP?
IdeaGrove.com. That's IdeaGrove's the name of my agency, and you can find me there.
What does Idea Grove do?
We are a PR and marketing firm. We mostly work with B2B companies. We actually work with a lot of manufacturing companies.
All right, there he is. Scott Baradell, thanks for being on the James Show again.
Thank you.